Hello, everyone. Good morning. So we are going to get started. This topic is so important, and I can't wait to hear from these panelists on how to create social good within advertising. So working in the agency business, you don't always get to choose the clients you want to work on. Some may align with your personal mission, some may feel unethical or not authentic to who you are, and some may feel like you've sold your soul to work on a piece of business to drive up sales. So today we're going to address how you can help produce great work and return on investments for your clients in the social good space. So we'll have the panelists go ahead and introduce themselves, starting with you.
Great. Hi, I'm Jason Carmel, and I'm the Chief Data Officer at Possible. I'm also one of two Jasons on the panel, so people might call me Carmel. It's okay.
Hi, I'm Suresh Nair. I'm a Chief Creative Intelligence Officer at Gray. I've been at Gray for the last 13 years, working in the strategy area.
I'm Cecelia Wogan-Silva, and I've been at Google about 11 years, working primarily on creative agency partnerships and ad campaigns on digital platforms.
I'm Jason Sperling, the other Jason. I'm Chief of Creative Development at an agency called RPA in Santa Monica. I run the creative for the Honda business, for a lot of our nonprofit work. Before that, I worked on Apple for several years, and I'm happy to be here.
All right, great. So over the past year, we've seen ad campaigns do a number of things in the social good space. Some have done well, some have missed the mark. Nike and Colin Kaepernick was a campaign most recently that was tremendously successful. But then also we all remember the Pepsi Trivializing Black Lives Matter campaign, Dove's Facebook video skin on campaign, and H&M's monkey hoodie reference, which was terrible. So let's dive on into the questions. Producing work with good intentions is not enough. What is the best way to create work that matters and draws audience engagement and drives sales? I'll start with you, Suresh.
Oh, wow. I must have made eye contact right there. Yeah, I mean, I think there's been so much data, so much science and studies done that shows that when you do work that's good for society, that's good for people, it's good for business. So it really shouldn't be in conflict with each other. So our challenge is, how do you make sure that you create ideas that have that good intention baked into the very beginning of it? So how can we create a dialogue within the agency team and the client team to make sure that these intentions don't just vaporize halfway through? I mean, we have done innovations in the way we brief teams, how the briefs look, to make sure that these kind of diverse thoughts, diverse ideas are reflected. Again, starting with diverse teams create diverse ideas. So just making sure the team is set up for success in that front.
I would add that I think today social impact marketing is such an important topic, especially for Gen Z, the largest buying market of tomorrow. But they're so good at identifying the BS. Their filters are exceptional. And their expectations aren't simply for brands to represent a cause, but to participate with them on that cause. I think a recent example of somebody who's doing it really well, MasterCard, has done an exceptional job of making sure that they're doing more than telling a story about Start Something Priceless, but they're actually asking people to participate with, say, touchless billboards in order to donate and participate in something. Represents their brand, represents their product, but allows their audience to actually participate, because it's not enough to just be on the receiving end of a message in order to really have impact.
Yeah, I think it's important to have a feedback loop so that you understand as you're producing this work that you're doing it the right way. And I think actually an important point is that with social good these days, I think it's hard to understand the sort of what's good anymore. I think that line in the ground is kind of shifting. I think with this current administration and a lot of people sort of coming out and really, standing up for what they believe in, good or bad, I think you've got a riskier environment where if you're coming out and saying we're going to do something that's good for society, there's a chance that it's not good for half of our society now. With the Colin Kaepernick issue, that was social good for a lot of people, and that was not for a good many others. And you know, we have our moral compasses that sort of guide us, but they're very different and shockingly different, I would say. You know, so when a company comes out like Nike and says, you know, we believe that the black community has the right to kneel during the Star Spangled Banner, I think it's a bolder, riskier move. And I think it becomes a much more complicated discussion inside of an agency, inside with the client to know whether or not that's the right thing to do, because it is, you know, we are tying this to sales, we are tying this to brand loyalty, and are you comfortable risking losing customers in order to gain customers?
I completely agree.
Okay, good.
I think the authenticity question, you don't need to be a data person to realize that there is that people are exceptional at calling horseshit on things. And for me, our chief creative officer has this really good, very simple rule to follow, which is like, if something comes in for a social activation, like, why are you asking for a social activation? Like, it's a weird brief to get, I think, at the end of the day. We'd like you to come up with a social good to do that will do something for our brand, when in fact, it feels like it should be flipped. Like, what right do we have to do something good, and then let's see how that will resonate with our audience. So a lot of times when I've seen it go really well, it's because people come at it from that angle rather than from the angle of, okay, so I hear social activations are the thing, let's make it happen, see what comes up.
Yeah,
I
could sort of imagine getting that brief and then having to ask the next question, which is, well, how bold do you want to go? Because of this issue of like having such high filters, and it is becoming more common, and nobody really wants to be caught greenwashing, and just doing but I gave a bunch of money to charity, that's not enough. And so you have to ask that question on the brief, not just what is aligned to your brand, how can we engage your audience in a way that they can participate with us, how bold do you want to go? Because otherwise you're in sort of neutral yellow territory that's like,
which was like Pepsi, and you'll get called out for it.
Right.
So that leads me into my next question, because many of them are trying to get behind which cause-related issues they should support, which social good issues should they take a stand behind. Some care, some see that it's a trend and they could become more profitable. How would you advise clients who are new to this space to get behind an issue?
I think I'll jump on it. I think the first challenge is really, what right do you have to play in that space? Each brand will have to ask that question and make sure that when you do go out and put a stake in the ground, that people see, okay, I understand why that brand is standing behind a cause or having a product initiative that has a larger purpose. If you have to kind of think too hard about it, you lose people. So that kind of, it's being authentic to your true purpose, as well as making it easy for people to see why you are, taking up my valuable time to convince me about this big social cause. Well, I rely on you to buy shavers or laundry detergent or whatever it is. And that commercial good has to coincide with that social good effort, almost inextricably. And that's easier said than done. One example that comes to mind is, and it came through because one of the teammates had a real personal passion for it. One of the clients we work with is Gillette, and Gillette is 100-plus-year-old company. They're known for making razors primarily for men, and they've branched off into making razors for women as well. But they have never really created out of the thousands and thousands of products they've made. They've never created one that can be used to shave somebody else, right? When men want to get a shave from someone else, you go to the barber shop. But a lot of us are in a situation where you're taking care of older parents and older grandparents. So one of the teammates who came up with this, our creative director actually, he had some experience taking care of his dad. And he had this idea of what if this big company, global company, could actually create a product that and hand it out to caregivers and really make a statement about multi-generational caregiving. Yes, it has very tight linkage to what the brand is good at doing, but it also served a larger purpose. I mean, right now it's being treated as a pro bono effort, but there could be a whole line of products that come out later on. But the idea is to facilitate more caring in the world, and through something that we know really well how to do.
Love that.
I think there's a graph. I regret not drawing it for the screen, but there's an inverse relationship where I think the more you tie something to your product, the less you have to prove passion and authenticity. I think I loved the REI opt-outside programming from if you're in advertising. It's you know it and have to respect it. But at some level, REI it's so perfectly aligned with what they do, and it's tied to their products that, in a sense, you didn't have to prove the passion because it was there instilled in the product. I think the further away you get from something like that, the more you have to commit to something over a longer period of time, over a regular period of time, to prove that you actually give a rip, that you're not, as you mentioned, just writing a check and then seeing what happens next year.
And I think that's an important part too, is we have to recognize that there is, in some ways, like a willful blindness within the audience, where their understanding that corporations are they need to make money, that this is part of their making money and building up brand loyalty, and that there's strategy behind this. And I think you see it. Some of the best cases are when you look at the reaction to something you've done, and it's, you know what, I don't necessarily love advertising or love big companies, but this touched me, and so I'm sharing it or I'm supporting it. And so I think we have to understand, first and foremost, our audience is not necessarily thinking that this is all philanthropic and generous, that there is something behind it. I think it's important that whatever we do, we go in 100%, because I think they will sniff it out if we don't. I can tell you, I was on, we did a big thing for Honda a few years ago called Project Drive-In, where we were helping to keep the American drive-in movie theater open. When we first presented the idea, the first reaction is great, let's save a few. And it didn't feel like that was going to, it would have been received as, oh great, it's just a cursory, let's throw a little money at them, get tied to the cause, and that's it. Someone up at the top at Honda recognized, hey, we really have to stand for this. Right. We have to do more than just save a few. We really have to lead this movement. And it was a huge, huge success for them.
Yeah. The only thing I would add, everything you just said, yes. The only thing I would add is I would start a conversation with a customer by reminding them about what the data is showing, that right now trust is at an all-time low among one another, at its lowest for government institutions, for NGOs. The expectation for business to lead and take a responsible role in society has never been higher. So I would begin the conversation with the reality is, yeah, they're looking to you, and they do expect it. They don't expect you to do it without making a profit. That's fine. So let's just call it like we see it. But that being said, everything that you have all talked about in terms of authenticity, I sort of think of it like, if you want to be a great actor, you better commit. There's no going back. Once you decide it's drive-ins, it's drive-ins. Once you decide it's kneeling during the anthem, then it's kneeling during the anthem. And you're going to live it and breathe it and be ready to stay the course, because they will call, we're living in such a transparent environment where people can catch everything on video and post it anyway. The minute that you don't live those values out loud and demonstrate that, you will be found out, and that'll hurt. So know that the expectations are there and plan to commit.
So let's say, okay, you've guided your clients to take part on a social justice issue, they're committing, they're ready to stay the course, but then they're headed down a road that is disastrous. How do you advise them before it's too late? Start with you, Cecelia.
I don't have any clients that do that. They never mess up. I don't know. I really don't, because I'm at Google and I don't run point with these customers who are coming into each of these agencies all the time. You're going to hear this from me, in the conversations you and I have had already, and throughout the remainder of the day is data. Just keep showing them the numbers, test and iterate, get the information out there, find out from your focus groups. Those focus groups obviously representing a diverse point of view. Go out there and find out, because otherwise having a conversation about a highly controversial subject like race and kneeling during the anthem is not one of those things you can win based on opinion. So you really need to help guide using as much data as you possibly can. That'd be my vote, but I turn to the men who have customers asking them.
No, there's nothing like a good user study to horrify the powers that be into doing the right thing. I mean, it's self-referential for the data guy to say use data as well. But I honestly believe that there's no substitute for human interaction to prove that you're about to do a big thing badly, even with the best of intentions.
Mm-hmm. I mean, in the agency world, we have a lot of tools that allow us to make sure that helps make sure that we are not straying off our originally determined the rightful path. And I'm talking about even, as cliched and boring as it may be, the creative brief. It's not meant to be boring, but it is. We all take it for granted, right? So earlier this year, we partnered with 3% and added a simple, but I think kind of profound statement to our brief, which was, how will you make sure that this idea will represent and respect the diverse world around us? And it forces right from the get-go, agency and client to answer that question in some way. And the reason that's important is, from that point on, you're constantly checking your actions against that brief that was written on day 0. And that becomes a guidepost, almost, and hopefully it won't become a stifling document, then we failed, but it should be something that we check against. And that's what we do. I mean, not just for work that aims to do social good, work that aims to do anything. That's a document that we go back to. I think we tend to ignore some best practices and tools that we may already have, like data, the brief itself, and keep having that conversation ongoing. Keep it alive. And if you still make a mistake, you know what? Then maybe there was no saving you.
I think it would have been awesome on this panel to have someone who really had a notable failure to point to and was okay pointing to it. Someone who might have worked on the sort of tone-deaf Kendall Jenner ad, right. Someone who might have worked on the Dodge Super Bowl ad with the Martin Luther King speech to promote a truck. The ones that really were the hardest hit. I would just be so curious where in the process did it go wrong, or did it feel right, or was there ever a point in that process where they said, "Uh-oh, this is not going to work out well," or did it take the actual backlash for them to understand? There's a diversity at Honda, being a big car company, who's always, they always want to be on the right side of things. In terms of consumer reaction, they have a diversity group set up on their side that everything runs through, so that we don't necessarily step on a landmine or something that we just didn't notice.
Yeah,
happened.
we have a similar thing at Possible. We've launched an inclusion design practice that's focused on people with disabilities, and a lot of the advertising, the little advertising that's out there that actually focuses on that group that it's historically way underrepresented is done as sort of inspiration porn, for lack of a better term. And so we've built a similar a panel, if you will, to run a lot of our work through to say, all right, listen, we're with the best of intentions, this brand is trying to be inclusive, it's trying to be representative, and it's trying to tell a story. Just how much are we getting this wrong? Like, if at all. And it has saved bacon.
Yeah.
Apologies to vegetarians, but it has saved bacon considerably just by having that that check.
How did you build the panels, and are they live and in-person conversations, or are they anonymous in any way?
It's they sign up to become sort of part of this panel, and what we found, and I think it's typical with any underrepresented group, is that they are very excited to tell you just how much and what is wrong, and where you can fix things. And so we have a panel of about 200 people, and it's growing, of people that we can show this stuff to, and they are very frank and very honest, and quite powerful and articulate in explaining what works and what doesn't, not to make people without disabilities feel good about themselves, but to make people with disabilities who are a customer feel like they're being heard.
Smart.
I mean, we often talk about diversity leads to better business, and it's important to have diverse voices at the table when important decisions are being made. And you both Jasons had talked about some inclusion strategies that are happening inside your companies. But what are each of you all doing individually to make sure that diverse representation and diverse voices are at the table? And I'm just interested to hear a little bit more about the inclusion strategies at your companies.
If I could just jump on again with the people with disabilities, because we have a very specific. I have a rule. It's one of my favorite rules. It's a data-related rule, and I'm in front of a lot of creative people, so I want to share it with you. Which is, it's anecdotal. So think in your head when the last time was that you saw an ad, print, digital, wherever, that had a redhead in it. It's probably today. You could probably comes up. There are the same number of people who are redheads in the U.S. as there are people in wheelchairs or other mobility issues. So why are redheads so overrepresented in advertising, whereas people in wheelchairs or with crutches or other mobility-assisted devices not? There's some miserable statistic that like 6 in 10,000 ads has a person with a visible disability. So one of the things that we are starting to do, and again it happens in the brief, I think, is to come up with these, little reminders, these little programs where, all right, if you get a comp and it has a redhead, ask where the comp is with the person in the wheelchair. So I think it's a lot of little things like that. That's not going to save the world, and it's not going to make everything right that hasn't historically been right. But I think it's a lot of these small changes that add up over time institutionally that'll make a difference.
Well, I think it's important, and I think this is going to maybe one of your other questions, but having the right voices at the table, and having the right leaders who are either connected to the cause because of some, we work with the Pediatric Brain Tumor Foundation, and we work with Children's Hospital Orange County. Anyone who has gone through that experience, who has a passion for it, you are invited to be on this team and be one of the voices in the projects. We work with the LGBT Center in LA. That team, we have voices from that community as well. So there's an authenticity to the work and an understanding of the audience. I think it's really, if I'm remembering the question right, just making sure that you're serving up the right message, guided, I think, by the right perspectives.
Yeah, there is so much to be said for hiring the right people to be at the table that's representative of a diverse, range of views, men, women, black, white, LGBTQ. But I'm 50 and I'm an extrovert and I'm outspoken, and still I don't always call out. We were in the backstage and I didn't actually speak up on my own behalf with regard to something that had crossed my mind. And so I think that even with the right intentions of creating a diverse environment, of wanting to have the right kind of conversations, it still puts a lot of pressure on individuals to be able to remember and have the strength or fortitude to lean in and stand up when you see something that doesn't feel right. And I can't take any credit for this, but I will say that Lorraine Toohill, who is one of few marketers of the year from last year and has been quite outspoken on the subject, has a really great point of view on how to make sure that those voices are always heard and have strength behind them. One, panels and focus groups, and two, technology can be our best friend under some circumstances. Some of the work that has been produced at Google is done in partnership with the Gina Davis Institute and USC, using artificial intelligence to scan. So that what you're doing is not simply leaning in and going, I feel that that's a stereotypical voice in a conversation when you're the only person in the room who has to try to represent that. You're able to lean into the conversation and say, here's what the machines just told us is happening in terms of all of our storyboards. We are only we've got so many redheads and nobody in wheelchairs, or whatever the data point needs to be. I think under these circumstances, again, I feel that creating the right environment is a brilliant base, but we need data to keep us honest.
I do want to make a point about, I think it's a great point, Cecelia, the creating the right environment bit, right? So we are all focused on bettering the diversity of our talent pool, right? Because there's a business case for it. We're all striving to get better and better at it. But what we don't do a good enough job of, I say we in the larger sense, not just me, is that we don't activate that population once they're in the agency, right? There aren't enough attempts made to make sure that these people come in, they have a voice, and the voice is being heard. And it's just, and I think that part of it has to come from the top. It has to be a top management down sort of approach. Only then these voices from the grassroots can flourish. And I don't think we as an industry do a good job of that, because we believe in, let's bring the people in, throw them at a problem, and they will sink or swim. That's hard. If you're a young person starting out, you can't, it takes a tremendous amount of courage. We are all been there at some point in our career to speak up when the most senior person in the room has definitely a screwed up point of view on the world, right? And how do you muster courage? Who do you seek as allies to go up against that? And you have to build a culture where that's allowed, and it's allowed and spoken. It's okay to speak up in a meeting. If you don't have anything to say in a meeting, you shouldn't be there. But it's easy, again, even for me to just say it, but in practice, every day, we have to constantly remind our folks about that. And that's easier said than done. That's the biggest challenge. There's more work to be done on that.
Going back to the success of social justice campaigns and cause-related campaigns, we talked a lot about data. What specific measurement tools would you define success for some of these campaigns? Before they're successful, what would you use to show that we're headed in the right direction?
I think it so radically depends on the campaign itself. So it's interesting, you look at something like REI's Opt Outside, and their goal was to shut the stores and let their folks go outside, and it resulted in higher sales. Now, I think long-term goal from something like that is more sales, and that's great. And so you can measure it by that. You can measure it by engagement and voice and share of voice and buzz, however you want to do that. It's, as a data person, one of my favorite terms. But we, at Possible, we have this program that we started about a year ago called We Counter Hate, and it's an effort to fight hate speech on Twitter. We built a machine learning to scrape Twitter, and anytime we find something that's really toxic, like awful, we respond to it and we say, if you retweet this, we're going to donate $1 to a nonprofit for inclusion and diversity. And it's supposed to make the frogs angry. It's supposed to make them not know what to do.
You got me.
Yeah, do I retweet it and then fund my disruption, or do I not retweet it and then not get to retweet this? And so for us, the actual engagement metric was an anti-media plan, which is how much less did this message get out, which is a really weird thing to do as an advertising agency, is to measure the exact opposite of what we're normally told to measure. But I think when you approach social good, you have to keep in the back of your mind that there is a business goal and then there's a social good goal. And if you overactivate or overmeasure one over the other, you'll be disappointed, and you're probably approaching it wrong. If all of your social good is tied to the business goals, save your cab fare. Like, you should probably just do an ad. Or if so for us, I think it's really important to right size the measurement according to what both the business and the social good goal is.
I love that it's the reverse. That's just great. It's like how much did I not get done in terms of forwarding this message? I mean, back to sort of what the data is showing in terms of people's expectations of any company that wants to drive an agenda, a social impact agenda, is going to be held accountable toward actually showing that there was some sort of difference that was made. So I talked about the MasterCard example, which I think is quite good. They're measuring their impact based on the amount of food that they were able to fund for the World Food Program. And they're measuring that in partnership with the World Food Program from the United Nations. They're not measuring that based entirely on how many people engage with the billboard, right? And of course, it was wonderful for helping to elevate awareness of contactless payment. That's great. Maybe there was a metric along those lines. But the metric is the impact that it actually had. Did you recycle more? Did you actually have an effect on clean water? Did you actually have an effect on race relations? Did you actually have a conversation or an effect in terms of how many children that were going without food are now getting food at lunch? Because that's the metric that in the world of transparency, your Gen Z is going to hold you accountable to. And that you're going to be able to stand up and say, I didn't just do this because it felt good for an ad campaign, I live it. So those are the types of metrics that are becoming critical.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, no, there's a level of depth and conviction that goes into something, and that's when you're measuring, how many lives you saved or how many lives you've changed, versus the advertising aspect of it, where it's about views and shares and feelings about the brand, and there's just different levels.
Yeah.
Well, before we open for questions to the audience, quickly, I want to know, how do you all center yourselves to get creative personally that grows into your professional lives? So how do you get creative? What do you do that fuels the creative juices? Looking at you, Jason, to start.
Help me. Has nothing to do with social good.
All about you.
Physical activity for me is like so necessary to sort of get my mind going. I also think that surrounding myself with incredibly creative and driven people, that when I start to lose steam, I get it sort of secondhand from them. But I am just a passion engine, and I know the head of that will
Hashtag passion engine. I'm using that.
And I frustrate the hell out of a lot of people in my agency. Just the drive to do better work and better in the world. It's just you got to keep invigorating it.
Mm-hmm. Cecelia?
I am a person who is fed by other people. I thrive by engagement with others. Some people need to go home and recover. I have friends like that, and God bless the introverts, but I definitely get my energy from just talking to lots and lots of people. I really like it. But that said, I do enjoy a little time to kind of reflect and synthesize what all that incoming stimulus means to me. I used to hate commuting. I'm terrible behind the wheel. I'm a horrible person. But when somebody else is doing the driving these days, it's kind of my moment to go, what did I hear? What am I thinking? What do I really think about all of that? So these days I'm using my commute to synthesize all the outside input. The second most important stimulating source for me right now is my 14-year-old daughter's music. I listen to music of all kinds, and whatever she turns me on to kind of stimulates me to think about, what does this mean culturally? Where are we? What is this saying about how women are perceived? And music is a great stimulus for me. Yeah, it can be, but it's really cool when you get your 14-year-olds dropping like, no, listen to all the women rappers who are talking about producing their own music now. I love that, and I'm like, yeah, okay, that's cool.
We have different 14-year-olds.
Okay, well, I'll drop some
Good for you.
playlists for you.
Happy for you.
The one thing I'll add to what has already been said is, we are in a creative industry, so we are supposed to be creative. I have to come up with ideas, and so we all fill ourselves up with inspiration from all these sources. What we should not forget is to just live our lives, right? A lot of inspiration comes from everyday life. And I had to learn this behavior, tell you the truth. When you engage with your neighbors, your kids' friends, and just your friends, who, if you're lucky enough to have friends outside of the ad world, just immerse yourself in that world. Be a human being, and insights will come, right? Because maybe, as a strategist, tend to get overly analytical, and that's a problem. If you don't have new inspiration, new thoughts, new human insights going in, nothing is going to come out that's going to be any different from what much smarter people have thought of already in the past. So I think there's a lot of inspiration around us in our daily life. And sometimes we forget to look deeply, just be there, be in the moment. And just stuff will happen down the road.
Great.
I think that is the single dumbest thing I've ever heard.
That's me, that's my role.
No, obviously, I think that's great. I do sort of meta, but I think confrontation is a really great source of creativity. And I don't mean like what I just did. That was a joke. Suresh and I are old friends.
Not anymore.
But what I do mean is that the ability to, in a reasonably comfortable environment, be a little vulnerable and to say, I actively think that might be dangerous or bad, or it makes me a little uncomfortable. Let's talk about that. I think that's a really good. I've always found that to be a little uncomfortable, but kind of rewarding. I also am a huge fan of. I have kids and using them as a sources. I loved the yeah maybe talk this morning, and it happened from a sort of at a child moment, and I feel like there are probably a dozen of those a day that I could get from my kids that if I bothered to pay attention more, if I lived in the moment, I might be able to pick up and learn more from.
Wonderful, thank you. Let's open up the floor to any questions. Or
I see one back there.
what, in the way back? The way back. Could you stand up so they can maybe run the mic?
I think they're getting you a pillow to talk to.
Excuse me.
There comes the pillow.
Yeah.
Did this thing actually come out earlier?
Yeah. Hello. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much. This is probably my favorite topic and that I discuss a lot with my community. So I am not a creative director. I'm a campaign strategist and producer, but I work very closely with the creative director. And I've been very lucky to work on incredible campaigns. Two come to mind where we produced, and I want to run this by you. We produced a short film highlighting, telling the story of a blind architect. And in the end, we produced a very short branded doc that was not audio described. And that was not the main one. We created an audio described version as a nice to have. And I've worked on films where we had interviews done in Spanish, and obviously there's a large population of Spanish speakers. This one was particularly in Puerto Rico. Anyway, our main version had the translations done in English, and we had a bonus video with the translations for both Spanish and English, which I both advocated for. So my question to you is, I have had the experience of having this very, inclusive versions as bonus content, or as, the nice to have that we give ultimately to the client, but they haven't been the ones that they share. So in your position, helping to lead the culture and inspire clients and brands to do good, how do you manage that? How do you work to inspire the client so that they can use content that is inclusive and representative as their main piece of work, and not as just the bonus nice to have?
I mean, I think that success begets success, and if I'm understanding this right, seeing the success and the transformative effects of work helps them understand the power of it and the potential to do more of it. We did something like 6 years ago for Honda, where we took a first generation Korean American band and put them on the Jimmy Kimmel Show and gave them this incredible experience to help get their name out there. And when it came time next year to really think of what else could we do, some social good, we showed them a lot of ideas, and they ended up saying, can we have that one again? And that was the year we did Project Drive-In, which was beyond successful. I think it's just important to keep reminding them of all the successes and where they lead to.
We'll have to take questions outside this panel because I think we're over time right now. So thank you all for your insight. Thank you. This has been great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.